Good evening. Konbanwa. Thank you all for being here this evening. I hear this is a fantastic program, and what I would really like to do is talk for only a few minutes, but open it up to a dialogue with you. My understanding is that most of you are high school teachers, high school counselors, and a variety of others, but for the most part, that's the audience that I'm talking to. And so I'd like to give you some of my thoughts first as a parent on why I believe it's incredibly important to have an overseas education. And then I'd like to talk to you about my thoughts as the ambassador of the United States to Japan. I have two children, a 22-year-old daughter who just graduated from the University of Pennsylvania and is now a nurse in Los Angeles, and a 17-year-old son who is a senior in high school. My son was going into his senior year in high school when President Obama asked me to become the ambassador to Japan. My wife and I decided, because he was going into senior in high school and because he had been with his classmates since 6th grade and incredibly close friends, that we would let him make the decision on whether to come to Japan with us for his senior year. He decided to split the difference, spending the first semester here in Japan with us and returning home the second semester to graduate with his class. This caused all kinds of issues from an academic perspective because the courses he was going to take here in Japan did not translate into the course credits or the courses he needed to take back in California, and a number of other issues, including who would be his college counselor applying to college, who would write recommendations, and the list goes on. The bottom line is it wasn't easy. He will now tell you that it is by far the greatest experience he ever had in his life coming here to Japan for a semester. He made new friends. He was exposed to entirely new culture. He's beginning to learn a new language. The list goes on. He also wants to return to Japan during his junior year in college or go elsewhere overseas because he recognizes that these experiences totally change your outlook on the world. I tell you this story because I think that he was very lucky that he had this opportunity, but every child should have that type of opportunity to spend time overseas studying. As the U.S. ambassador to Japan, I have a real vested interest in trying to convince you to encourage your students to spend time in the United States for several reasons, and I'll give you a couple of them. The first reason is I think the relationship between the United States and Japan is a very special relationship. We've all been hearing a lot about the security treaty between the United States and Japan, and that's incredibly important. But the underlying foundations of our relationship are equally, if not more, important. Educational exchanges between our two students is basically the future of our relationship, because when push comes to shove, it's all a personal relationship that develops between two people that solidifies that underlying foundation that's so important. So one of the main reasons for that I want to encourage you to send your students to America is to keep the bond, to solidify the bonds between our two countries. But there's another reason, and that is that we live in a global world, and I think it is incredibly important for Japanese students to have international overseas experiences, just as I feel the same way about United States students. You know, as the ambassador to Japan, I've had a wonderful opportunity to meet with some of the greatest leaders in industry in Japan. And at many of these dinners and meetings that I go to, these leaders have spent time in the United States. And I always ask them whether they believe that it was an important experience for them to have. And without doubt, all of them say it was a game-changing experience for them to spend time in the United States. And I ask them whether they think that if college students and high school students spend time overseas, it will enhance their value professionally and enhance their opportunities. And again, across the board, they all say yes. So from a purely selfish reason for what's in the best interest of these kids, to compete in a global world, to get jobs at these corporations, spending time overseas, and obviously I'm prejudiced with regard to spending time in the United States, but spending time overseas only enhances their value and their opportunities for successful careers. Let me make a couple final points and then I'll open it up. First of all, 14% fewer students decided to study in the United States last year than the year before. And the trend is not in a good direction. So we have to work together to get U.S. students to come over here to Japan and Japanese students to come to the United States. We have to increase our efforts. The second thing and what I'd like to end on this is more of a personal note. You as high school teachers, counselors, have, and I don't have to tell you this, have a tremendous impact on the future of the students that you teach. Most of us have one teacher in our lives, in our school lives, that has that unique impact on our futures that we look back on and say that there was this special teacher that really changed my life. I know I had a high school teacher in 10th grade that I will never forget that really changed my outlook on many things, and I still think about that high school teacher. So I would encourage you, because you do have this major influence on these kids' lives, to pick that one kid or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever that has that spark of interest to do something different, to broaden their experiences, to go overseas and work with them to help them achieve that dream. I said I was going to end on that last thought, but I want to end on one more thought. About a month ago, I was at Stanford University giving a speech, which is my alma mater, and an admissions officer from Stanford who happened to have read my son's application to college came up to me to introduce herself. Fortunately, he got in, or I'm not sure she would have come up and introduced herself to me. But what she said to me was that she had spent time in Japan, and she offered her help to work with students over here in Japan who are interested in applying to Stanford, because one of the things she says is a lot of high school kids have the interest but don't really know how to go through the application process. So I think programs such as this are obviously very valuable, and I thank you for coming. But if you have needs for specific students that are interested in going overseas to the United States, contact us if there are issues, if there are questions, and we will help introduce you to people to work through that process, because sometimes it can be very daunting.